So this video is going to be about how do you find trig values when you're given critical information. So critical information in this video is going to be things like, say, points in the coordinate plane, or it might be you're given one trig ratio and you're also um, given the quadrant. And so then you have to find like all the other six. And so really it's going to be dealing with finding trig values in the coordinate plane when you're given critical information. And so hopefully this is helpful. We'll see how it goes. So the first example I'm going to do is, let's say that you're asked to find all six trig values. Find all six trig values given the point, let's say 12, -5. So if you're given the point 12, -5, and you have that, what you're going to do first is we're first going to just look and see what quadrant that point's in. And so that point is in 12, so you'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? All the way over, and let's just assume that that's 12 and down to, alright, I'll count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12, -5. There's your point. So the angle that you're actually working with is from the initial side all the way around. And so the point 12, -5 creates that angle in the coordinate plane, and we're going to look for the sine of theta. We're going to look for the cosine of theta. We're going to look for the tangent of theta, and we're going to find those by doing a little bit of work. And so one thing I encourage people to do is, rather than memorizing more ratios, because you already have things memorized, what I would encourage you to do is to draw a triangle. So given the point, you always draw a triangle, go up or down to the x-axis. So you always want to go to the x-axis and then over, and then this triangle, you can actually fill in the information and you can find what you need. So the vertical part would be -5 because that's the y value, that's how far I went down, and the horizontal part of that triangle would be 12 because that's the horizontal part, that's how far I went over to plot the point. And so the last thing you need to know is that this is the same as the reference angle, and so theta prime, and that's what we use a lot when we're finding like the sine of 330 degrees or the sine of 2 pi over 3. And so we always use this reference angle, and so if you put that there, now all you need is the hypotenuse, and you can figure out the sine, cosine, and tangent. So hopefully you know that that's Pythagorean triple. So the Pythagorean triple would be the hypotenuse is 13, and now you can go from there. So my opposite is -5, my hypotenuse, or excuse me, my adjacent is 12, and my hypotenuse is 13. So the sine of theta would be -5 over 13. Cosine would be 12 over 13. And tangent would be -5 over 12. Now, you're going to go from there, and you're going to do cosecant, secant, and cotangent. And so then, flip it, -13 over 5, 13 over 12, and -12 over 5. And so hopefully that makes sense. I'll kind of recap what we did. So if you're given a point in the coordinate plane and you're asked to find all six trig values, what you're first going to do is you're going to graph that point. And rather than memorizing the ratios, what I would encourage you to do, like your teacher might have told you about y over r or x over r representing cosine, what I would encourage you to do is just draw that side and then create a triangle. And so we created the triangle by going up to the x-axis and then over, right? And then we were able to label it, find the hypotenuse, and then solve it. Just remember that the angle always has to be, the theta prime always has to be in between the terminal side and the x-axis. If you have that set, you should be okay. Alright, another kind of example that you might see, and it's kind of rooted in this, is you might see the second example being, say somebody tells you that the cosine of theta equals negative 4/5, and let's say the, I don't know, cotangent of theta is negative, less than 0. And let's say that they are now asking you to find all 6 trig functions. So the first thing you want to do in a situation like this is you want to first figure out what quadrant you're in. If you figure out what quadrant you're in, then you kind of can draw a triangle in that quadrant and help you find all 6 trig functions. So the best way to do this is to kind of draw a coordinate plane and remember that the sine of theta is related to the y values. So if the y values are positive, then the sine is positive. And if they're negative, then the sine is negative. Cosine of theta is related to the x, and tangent of theta is related to y over x. So they tell me that cosine is negative 4/5. So if cosine is negative 4/5, that means the x values have to be negative. So I am either in the second quadrant or I am either in the third quadrant. I can't be in the first or the fourth because cosine is negative. That has to be where x's are negative. Then they tell me that the cotangent is negative, which means tangent is negative. Tangent comes from y divided by x. So in quadrant 3, the y values are negative, and so are the x's. So a negative divided by a negative would be positive. So it can't be this one either. It has to be quadrant 2, where when you divide a positive by a negative, it would get a negative. So now I know I need my triangle to be drawn. So the second thing I'm going to do is draw a triangle in quadrant 2. So I'm going to draw a triangle in quadrant 2. So the way that would look is, here's my quadrant 2. And then the triangle, remember, the terminal side would end in quadrant 2, and you're going to come down to the x-axis. And that's the way your triangle needs to look. Here's theta. And so now if the cosine of theta is negative 4/5, remember, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So negative 4 is going to be my adjacent. And my hypotenuse is always going to be positive, and so that is going to be 5. Hopefully you see that that's a 3, 4, 5 triangle, but just make sure that your other value that's missing, make sure that it's either supposed to be positive or negative based off the quadrant. So in quadrant 2, the y values are positive, so my vertical height of this triangle will also be positive 3. And now I can finish the problem by just finding, I guess I know the sine now. The sine of theta now is going to be 3/5. We already know the cosine of theta, which is negative 4/5. Tangent of theta now is negative 3/4. And we'll flip those to get the cosecant, secant, and cotangent. So 5/3, negative 5/4, and negative 4/3. All right. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, you can post them in the comments. And have a great day. Also, like and subscribe. Peace out.